One of the advantages of building a quilt using the Easy Complete quilt system is that you can pad stitch or embellish the pieces individually before they're actually put into the final project. In this case, these two pieces do not require pad stitching, but there are reasons that you may wish to do some embroidery or pad stitching to embellish the blocks. I'll give you an example. This is a St. Patrick's Day table topper. The reason I'm showing you this is technically the smaller piece does not require pad stitching in the center. However, all of the rectangles do require pad stitching. You can't tell that they're pad stitched from this side because it was an elaborate decoration on the front. I used a clear plastic polyester thread because if you use a nylon thread, it can yellow. Even though I used a clear plastic thread in the needle, I kind of wanted to experiment with the back. And so I used a decorative thread in the bobbin. I did not consider that when I did this centerpiece. So I want to caution you, if you're going to embellish the rest of the pieces in a quilt, you may want to embellish the centerpiece even though technically it does not need it. This is an embroidered piece that was simply installed after it was embroidered. So none of this stitching came in contact with the back piece of this quilt table topper. In order to construct a windmill table topper, I will require 4 rectangles that are going to look like this with this beautiful sparkly fabric as the face. Finding a fabric to match that or not clash with it at least was not as easy as I thought. So I ended up going with a very dull, boring fabric, and I want to improve it. So naturally I want to embroider it. I thought it'd be great to embroider it with this star, but I realized because the star is such a dense embroidery, it probably would not turn out looking very nice on the back. And I wanted to change the theme on the back too, to a blue jean theme. So I decided to simply embroider the fabric that I was going to place in the center. Since all of the rectangular pieces have to be pad stitched, I'm going to do it with decorative thread in the bobbin and clear plastic or coordinating thread that doesn't interfere with the design on top. That means that this quilt square will look plain compared to the others, especially if I want to make it reversible. If I pad stitch or embroider a design through all layers, I'm going to interfere with my top design. So instead of pad stitching, I simply embroidered the back. This orange thread was put there because I made a video. Normally I would be using this blue thread or maybe a white thread. So this is regular thread in the needle, and the back is an embroidered design that's going to coordinate with the other designs of the rectangles. So I had to embroider this side without going through the top layer, and then I'll position the top layer after the quilt's constructed, roll over the edges, and hold it in place that way. This is a sample of a quilt back, and this is going to be the center, and you notice it's very plain. So I'm going to pad stitch this using embroidery for quilts. When I pad stitched this, I did it to add interest, so I used a machine embroidery file for quilting, and I tried using variegated thread in both the top thread and the bobbin. Many home embroidery machines come with a separate bobbin case just for embroidery. That bobbin case has higher tension, so if I'm going to use a decorative thread in the bobbin, I never change the bobbin case from a regular bobbin case with regular tension to an embroidery bobbin case. If I'm using an industrial machine, I reduce the tension on the bobbin case by roughly 1/4 of a turn and experiment with that. And I never do any embroidery without first testing the file through all the layers. An important thing to consider when choosing any embellishment for the front or the back of the quilt is the size of the embellishment. These are couched because it's very obvious. The couch stitches were designed to be 1/2 inch smaller than the area where the sashing actually is stitched down. By that I mean this area right here. So the couching designs had to fit into just this field that's represented by the blue fabric. If you put the couching or any embellishment right to the edge, you run the risk of the embroidery being caught by these stitches, or even, having less than perfect centering become glaring. This piece is not centered exactly, I can tell, but I don't notice it too much because it's not close to these stitching lines. A good plan is to keep your embroidery or your embellishment 1/2 of an inch away from where these sashes will land when you construct them. To help you select the right size embellishment for any quilt block, we've installed these dashed lines. The dashed lines are the very limit of the field that'll be visible when the quilt's constructed and all the sashes are turned. I usually take a ruler and measure that line. This is 4. And so any embroidered piece I put in there will be 3 inches because I subtract 1 inch from the maximum length. For the honeycomb, it's a little different because there are 2 lengths to consider. So make sure you take the smallest one, or if you're going to choose an elongated pattern, make sure it's in the right direction. This is 6 inches, so my piece would be 5. This measures 5 1/4, so it would be 5 this way by 4 1/4 this way. To address any issues that way, I use a design that's only as large as the smallest measurement. So if this is 5 and I choose a design, I would choose a design in the 4-inch range.